You ever seen one of these before? They're kind of fun toys. If you've ever come into my office, you may have seen this, or you may have one at home. Today I want to tell you a little story, a little illustration that I use when I'm talking with my clients or with my students when life seems incredibly overwhelming. That might be pertinent for today as we kind of draw towards exams and the different things that are happening. So, there was a guy named Viktor Frankl, and you might have heard of him. He wrote a famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in Man's Search for Meaning, he references this idea of an internal versus external locus of control. And it came out of his perceptions when he was in a Nazi concentration camp as a Jew. And he basically, the story went that why is it that some people, even though they're treated the same, mistreated really, some people die and some people survive. What he came to find out is those that believed that even if they did survive, what's the point? The Nazis have taken our homes, they've taken our families are dead, there's nothing to go back to, what's the point? I might as well just give up. Those people would die. The people that survived were those that said no matter what the Nazis do, even though they have blown up our homes, even though they have murdered our families, even though they've been mistreated, I will overcome this, and there is something greater within me than that which they're doing to me. Those are the people that survived. It was this premise that was considered and known as an internal versus external locus of control. Because I like to show things in illustrations, I was in a toy store and I saw this and I thought, wow, that's an internal versus external locus of control. So let me show you how this works. I have a couple of figurines here. I like my figurines, so I have this guy, bring him nice and close so you can see him, this scared guy, and hopefully you can still see his piece. It's a little hard to show on a video. Here's our world that we're going to put around us here, and if you can see the little guy in there, he's kind of, and what happens is pressures from outside begin to push on us, pushing, and you can't really see the guy, but now it looks like the guy's really screaming, and it kind of crushes the guy. This guy does not have an internal locus of control, but rather has an external locus of control. He's attributing where the forces from outside are determining how he's going to feel, that he doesn't have any strength, and that these things push and push and push and push until they finally crush him. Much like sometimes we feel during this time of the year. But there's an alternative process. If this little guy here, this scared guy, represents the external locus of control, then I have this guy. This is Hercules. Hercules, as we stand him here, if I can get him to stand up, and we put our world on Hercules again. Now with inside there's this figure that says no matter what happens, I'm not going to let this world come in. And so there might be this pressure that's pushing from the outside, but because of the warrior that's within, says I will not let this come in. We call this an internal locus of control. I like to draw it as a diagram with my whiteboard like this. Here's my little stick figure. And I would say to people, which place would you rather you'd feel more comfortable in, this circle or that circle? And most people would say this one because I can breathe. But this one is represented, if it was a bubble, because pressure is coming in from the outside, pushing. This bubble stays intact because there's pressure from the inside that's equal to the pressure from the outside. An internal locus of control. It's a scriptural principle, even though Viktor Frankl brought it up in his Man's Search for Meaning, because in Peter it talks about greater is he who is where? Within me than he who is in the world. The internal is determining where I will be and who I will be. As you think about that this week, as you think about maybe the pressures around you, I want you to look deeper inside of who God calls you to be, who God has you and where he has you and what he wants you to do. And to begin to write down and to think about this idea that I have an internal locus of control. that there is something within me that can set those limits, that I do not have to allow the pressures of the outside to determine how I'm going to feel and how I'm going to respond. Because a lot of the times those pressures from the outside cause us to respond in ways that are not really congruent to who we want to be or who we should be. So let's make sure that we're attributing the right control. Is control being determined by what's happening around you, or are you going to allow God to speak from within? Internal versus external locus of control. I hope that's an interesting thing to think about this week as you work with your teams and push on to the end. Have a great Tuesday.